So, one of the things that has changed in my life recently and got me thinking about the same topic in kind of a more intense way, and wondering how other people feel about it. That's always been interesting to me. I've always, thinking about what it means to me, and I'm always wondering how other people perceive it and how they think about it. It's always been very interesting to me. And I guess maybe I've always wanted to know how weird I was. Like, okay, how strange is this? Because I find that, like, my wife, my best friend, basically, she is really different in a lot of ways than me, so it's like, wow, man, she's so starkly different than me. How different is everybody else? It's basically about how aware of a person's need for having a purpose in life, how important that is. And I know there's been a lot of people talking about that in the last couple of years, especially in context of young men growing up, the lack of purpose. And, but I've always wondered about this, and this has always been a big part of my life, because like right now, I was off for 2 years. I was traveling with my wife, and she's a traveling nurse. So my purpose, and it was really fulfilling, was taking care of her and taking care of the house, taking care of the family, like, rubbing her feet, making sure her back's good, cooking all the meals, taking care of her, making sure she gets to work, driving her everywhere, being her support. It's a tough job,
Yeah.
And I felt really fulfilled in that, and it took the place of other purposes I've had in my life. I used to be a pastor, and it was about going into the jails. It was about helping people, trying to help them in their life, so them get jobs and help them get their life back on track. That really was a purpose. Before that, I was a musician. It was all about, it's all about music. It's all about making art, and all this stuff. It's always been a big purpose with me. And I also realized that a part of that is because I've always struggled with, like, depressive thoughts, like, hey, I wish I was dead, or hey, I hate, my life is great, but I just always am down. I tend to think, okay, I just don't want to live anymore, and always looking for this reason to live, knowing that's going on in my head. And so I used to fill it with these big purposes, and sometimes they became not a good thing necessarily in my life, because I was always running onto this next big dream, this next big thing to try to keep me going, right? And it can kind of be addictive. It kind of be weird a little bit, can become weird, because purpose can be a really good thing. So anyways, I started working recently again because we wanted to make some extra money, pay off some bills, and things have changed a little bit. So, but now I'm working all the time. They asked me to be a manager again, and I was never going to do that. Now I'm working all these hours, and now I've started to feel purposeless, because money is not a purpose to me. It's never done it for me. So I started feeling, man, I don't have a purpose anymore, and then I started to feeling depressed, and I started thinking, oh man, what is my purpose? And so I was wondering how you perceived it, how aware of you. Let's go back in your life, though. I want to go back when you were young. Not that you're not young anymore, but we're not getting any younger. But back when you were starting, how aware were you of a purpose for your life? And if you weren't, how did it change? And how did it change you when you started to think about a purpose? Where does a purpose come from? And also, does your purpose depend on other people seeing you succeed? Because I realize a lot of the things I've always done have always required other people to witness what I'm doing. And like, being a musician, it's great being a musician, but you got to have people watching your shows, right? And you're getting feedback from them. So there's part of that. Even when I did my podcast, I was curious about my topic, but I was wanting to interact with other people and seeing if they was affecting them. Or even when I was a pastor, it was about dealing with other people and seeing how I was affecting their lives. So that was kind of strange. I wonder, how do you deal with that? Does what other people think of what you're doing and your success, does your success depend on how they see you? honestly, how does that affect you? Because I know you might deal with it better than me, but it's got to affect you in some way. If everybody, if nobody listens to your podcast or nobody likes your lectures, or it's got to affect you. And how do you deal with that? So, can you talk about that kind of thing?
Well, you said an awful lot there, and I think it's very interesting in a lot of different ways. The number one most important part about it that I noticed while you're speaking, because this is why I tell people to speak. I tell people to have conversations. I tell people to write. It articulates your thoughts. I almost feel like you came to some conclusions about the questions you asked while you were talking through your thoughts. But to start where you originated with how it affected me growing up, and then we'll move into how it affects me now, and then also on to because that's a very important part of it as well.
Yeah.
Do you need the validation while doing it to concrete it as your purpose?
Yeah.
Growing up was difficult for me, not because I had any sort of traumatic childhood or, nothing overly bad happened to me. It was general childhood. We didn't have a lot of money, but like I said, we were never suffering or abused or absolutely out of food, while maybe there were some weeks where we were a little tight. But I did see a lot of aimlessness. And, I look at my uncles and I look at my grandfather and I look at my father, men that I would typically look up to. They were very aimless. None of them had passion. None of them really had purpose. And I'm not speaking negatively about those folks. It's just that I remember looking at them and not realizing what they were really about. Even my father, he drank, he partied, he went out, and he worked a job, but it was not a great job. He went to the military. He went AWOL. Like, he did all these things in his life, but he never did anything worthwhile. He never, I never seen him excited or passionate about anything. Moving on, like my uncles and my grandfather, like they just were like big gamblers. Like, I grew up very close to Atlantic City, so they were just in and out of Atlantic City, and the drinking and the women outside of their relationships. Very aimless, very pleasure-seeking behavior, temporary, that just whatever they wanted, whatever they want now. There was no real major aim and purpose that I perceived. And obviously I'm speaking now in retrospect because I didn't even realize I realized this.
Okay. So you weren't really aware of that right at the time.
Yeah, I wasn't really aware of it. I thought this was what men do. They have a wife and kids, but really they're off gallivanting and gambling and womanizing and doing all, maybe they get excited during a sports game or this or that, but there was nothing like big, man, in their life, no driving purpose. And not to say that a purpose has to be big, because I found purpose in a lot of very small things, which I'll go into a little bit later. But because of that aimlessness, Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot, is like, if you don't have an aim in life, you're just going to drift with the wind. You're going to drift with external events. You're going to drift with your emotions and behave based upon those things. And to me, it is much worth living to live a driven life, a focused life, a more sustainable a life where I'm deciding where I go, at least within all the things that I'm capable of handling, things that are not outside my immediate control. So growing up, because I viewed men that way, and also started to sort of glamorize that behavior, the partying, the drinking, the womanizing, and being a player and all these different things. Once again, retrospect, I didn't realize it, but this was how I was being programmed, and it's why I experienced so many problems later on in life. As I get into my late teens, and this is something that I tell my children already at 7 and 5 and almost 3, figure out whatever you want to do and just do it. It may change. That's okay. Right. Because one of my big things was I couldn't figure it out. I wasn't very great at school, but I was smart enough to get through. I played some sports. I wasn't good enough to go to a professional sports team, although I may have gotten to college and played had I got better grades. But I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to be a writer. Then I went through my musician phase, like you were saying, you know, all wavering, never sustained focus, just
Right.
wavering. I couldn't figure it out. And therefore, you know, you see me now figuring it out later in life. You know, I had my first son at 36. And I just got into my career in my 30s, and now, you know, I'm 44 and I'm already retired, semi-retired.
Yeah.
You know, so things change very, you know, vastly, man, over the years. So when you figure out what it is that you want to do, it doesn't have to be concrete. It doesn't have to be forever. So I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I was wavering with the emotions, wavering with external events, spending most of my time chasing women, which was an absolute waste of time. I mean,
Yeah.
literally an absolute waste of my time. Um, Brought me nothing but pain and misery, because as I was chasing these women, what I may not have realized at the time was I was looking for something to complete me, because
Yeah.
I was like I was missing
Just
something.
gonna ask you that. Yeah.
Well, later on, then that's why came the drugs and the criminality and all these different things, because I was filling that God hole within me. I really needed God and I needed
Yeah.
spirituality, but I didn't have that. I didn't believe in it. That wasn't cool. So, but what
Right.
was cool was sleeping with a lot of different women and partying and doing drugs and going to activity and gambling and hanging out with the crew and buying everyone drinks and, you know, all these different things. So I aimlessly floated like that until I landed in prison.
Mm.
Then, you know, I just continued on in that way until I landed in prison again, and I landed in prison again, and I landed in prison again. Well, once I found Buddhism, and then moved on to the yoga and the this and the that and the meditation and the prayer, and I really got figured out a lot of things within me, I did start striving for a purpose. And this is what one of the questions that I asked this guy. He used to come to the halfway house, and I really liked the guy, but he didn't have all the answers. And sometimes these folks act like they do. You know, never be afraid to just say, I don't know. You know, I don't know, but let me tell you something. I'll dig into it. You know, that's something I learned at work. My boss said,
Sure.
if you don't know the answer, go figure it out.
Right.
So I asked this guy, he said, you got to have a purpose. You got to have a purpose. I believed the guy on face value. I liked the guy, and it seemed like he was making moves in the world, you know, came suited up, looking good and all that. And I wanted it. I wanted what he had. I wanted to feel like that, wear a suit and feel like a man, you know, because up until then I was a criminal, I was a crook, I was a cretin. You know, I was like so immature. I wasn't a man. I was in my late 20s, but I just was, you know, a coward, a little boy. I didn't realize I was big, tough, bench pressing all his weight, but I didn't realize. So I seen this guy and I go, purpose must be part of the equation.
Mm.
So I remember the first question I asked him was this, and I say this a lot because I'll never forget it. You got to change your thinking. You got to change your thinking. You got to change your thinking. How? Blank. He had no idea. But I could tell you, and I tell people on Creating Greatness every week, so listen in. But the other question that I asked him was, I don't know what my purpose is, man. It's just striving to be a good man. Is that a purpose? And he said, yeah, yes. It could be as small as that. So as I started latching on to that, I realized that me being, you know, a lot of things were happening as well. Like I was talking about, I was getting into prayer, I was getting into yoga, meditation, and I realized that being mean and angry and miserable and acting vile towards folks was not getting me anywhere. So I was already sort of changing the trajectory of who I was and who I wanted to become by being kinder, by being nicer, by trying to cultivate the compassion that I did not have for other folks. So I thought, well, that's a good man. That could be my purpose. I'm getting into that. So that could be my purpose. And I really took that and ran with it, because I still really for a long time didn't figure out who I was or what I was supposed to be doing. What came about later, which was so funny, was, oh, I'm supposed to be doing all these things, man. You know, don't over-identify with one particular aspect of who you're being, because you can tend to go down that rabbit hole, get lost down that rabbit hole, and then neglect a lot of other awesome parts of your personality. Like you said, you know, when you were a musician, it was all in, just music. You know, when you were a pastor, it was all in, just being a pastor and going to jail. And then when you're doing the service for your wife, which is amazing and that's great, but you're all in and that was it. And now you're feeling that lack.
Yep.
And part of that is because from those acts, you were experiencing that validation that we also talk about.
Yes.
And that's tough, man. You know, the first thing I'll say is your purpose could be as big as small as you want it to be, but do it meticulously and do it excellently. Service is a huge part of it, and that's that warm and fuzzy feeling that you get from providing service to folks, especially when you're showed that appreciation, that validation that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Moving on into the creative realm, man, I think it's just ultimately important. And I said this, I'll give the plug to Creative Brew TV, Quantel Langford. I just did this podcast a couple days ago. He didn't drop the episode, but he did post it live on his Facebook, and I shared it as well, man. It's a very good episode where we talked about this. What if nobody's listening?
Yeah.
What if nobody's looking? What if nobody likes it? But I think it's of the utmost importance to strive for creativity in your life because it is an expressive outlet. It's something that balances out all the other emotions and things going on in your brain. And it's very extremely difficult to do it because you want to do it because you want to express yourself, do it because you love to do it, and forget about everyone else. You know, I posted this as well, not just a podcast that I was just speaking about, but just a meme that was like, man, dance if nobody's looking, write if nobody's reading, sing if nobody's listening, because ultimately it's for you and it's an expression of you. You know, I sing and dance with the kids all the time just to express my joy. I got one of the worst singing voices you ever heard in the world, but it brings me joy, man. It makes me happy. In fact, an interesting fact about singing is that it increases your lung capacity and has shown to make people happier. So we do that often, but it's difficult. It's difficult, man. I'm posting my heart, my soul, my blood, my sweat, my tears. I'm passionate. I continue doing this because I just have a burning desire to help folks.
Yeah.
You know, my life was so bad and now it's so good. And it was very easy. It was simple steps that we talk about on Creating Greatness every single episode. It is that burning desire that continues me doing it. But it hurts, man. Yeah, it hurts. It hurts because you wonder, am I talented?
Yeah.
Am I as good as I think I am? Is this helping anyone? Why am I even doing? And them questions can continue to roll into your mind no matter what your expressive outlet is. But I always say this, the validation is wonderful. It's nice. So when you see somebody doing something that you can appreciate on any level, let them know, man. Let them know. Whether it's a like, a share, a subscribe, a small kind word, you don't know how much that means to folks. Yeah. Especially when you're like me and you're like Tony and like a lot of other folk. We're not special. I talk to a lot of people on a lot of podcasts. They got 15, 20, 30 people listening. You know, I got about 100 people listening on Rumble. I got about 50 some people listening on Spotify. I'm doing it for y'all, and I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
So we try to let go of that. Try. That's all I can say because I haven't been able to do it yet. I try my best. I still look at the videos, see if anybody looked, commented. Like, I still look at my reels every day. So if you're watching them reels and getting any value out of it and you're listening here today, let me know, man. I'm doing it. I'm putting in the work.
Sure.
But yeah, you got to try to let it go, brother. Create, put it out there, and let it go, man. Let it do it. Let it live its own life, you know, and you move on to the next thing.
Let me ask you this question. This is a thought I've had for a long time. So I studied, I've studied the Bible and Christianity for a long time. And, I've looked at other faiths and kind of tried to extract the core of them, you know, what they're saying. And what I've kind of carved out in my mind is that, and I'm just going to make some statements that I kind of think, and I want to see what you think about them. That when I die and face my Creator, He's not going to care about how much money I made or about how successful I was in the eyes of other people. It's going to be more about how I treated people, how I loved people, how I cared about people, how I gave of myself for others. And I feel like that is the pinnacle of what, and you've already said it, you know, like when you first came to the idea of being a better man, I feel like that is the core of what God would want for me. Like, you know, and I'm not saying he's against making money or that you can't strive, but I've always had a difficult time balancing. It's either I'm going to be a complete aesthetic. I want to go live in the woods and, you know, or I want to put a robe on and go around and help the homeless and like, you know, live on the street. Like I'm such a man of extremes. It's so strange. I have such a hard time balancing, you know, wanting when I want something and I feel in my mind it's worldly, then I feel guilty about it. I'm like, oh no, I don't want that. I don't want that in my life. And I have a very difficult time, and I don't want to be judgmental. And I can even get judgmental of somebody who's pursuing those things. And I'm like, and that, what does that make me feel better than them? I'm a better person or something. That's ridiculous. But I struggle with that a lot. But do you feel like that's what you extracted from your search for God, is that he wants, I say he, you know, but that God would want you, that his main goal for you is to be a better person, to be more loving, more caring, more kind. I feel like it's just hard. You know what it's hard with that is it's hard to, that's a very broad, like you said, it's a very broad focus. It's hard to make that concrete, like, okay, exactly what do I do, you know, to be that. You know, I want to be a better man. I want to be a better husband, a better father, a better friend. But it's like the steps, you know, I can, if I want to be a CEO or I want to be an engineer or I want to be an astronaut, there's like concrete steps you can take. I got to go to get a degree. I got to do these things to achieve this goal. And I think sometimes I've seen myself and other people when they're approaching spirituality, they think that they could read a book or go through steps, you know, like it's the same kind of thing to do to become spiritually mature. Although there's practices that you can do, but I think that if you boil it down to how you achieve a worldly goal versus how you achieve a spiritual goal, I think there's a disconnect there sometimes. What do you think about that? How do you achieve a spiritual goal versus how you achieve a worldly goal? Are they the same? Can you put them in a 12-step formula, or is there a different aspect to it? What do you think about that?
Well, it's a tough one because had you asked me this, 5 years ago, I would say that they're all one and the same.
Right.
Because if you pursue the absolute best self status, the good man, the best possible man or woman or leader that you could possibly be,
yeah,
I almost feel like everything else is going to fall into place.
Right.
Now, on that road that I've traveled for, let's say 7+ years, my oldest son's 7, so 7+ years into really diligently trying to improve me as a person. And I always felt that way. It's all going to fall in place. Be the best possible version of yourself. Continue putting forth the work. Every little step you do, every little bad habit that you stop, every time you get judgmental, like you were just talking about, you catch yourself. Every time you're getting angry or frustrated and you continue to catch, it's these steps.
Right.
Every vice I cut out of my life, every good habit I put in place of it, every little step. And over the years of doing that, I sort of have come to a place on finances where I'm like, not that I am not comfortable, and I pray that I'm not greedy, but there's certain material world things that I need to put in place to sort of get out of the material world. If that, I'm looking for a nice piece of land. I'm looking for the play. We're still renting right now. There are a lot of complications with it. And I want it and I see it and I know that, hey, it's going to sound crazy to anybody listening, but this is my vision and it will continue to be my vision. If you've been listening to me for years and years and years, you've been hearing this vision and you're going to hear it again. I'm supposed to be a farmer. I want to be farming. I want to be, if you look to the left over here, I have cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage. Back here, I got beets, I got carrots, because that's the time of year we are in Florida. I'm studying this thing, man. Like whatever time of the year it is, I'm germinating, I'm planting. I have an indoor grow tent where I'm doing cucumbers and tomatoes because it's not that time of year. I mean, I am all in on it, man, because I feel like the more independent and sustainable we can become on our own. I just bought my son's an archery set. We're learning how to shoot arrows. We're learning how to fish. We just bought fishing poles. We are learning how to grow our own food. We already have learned a lot about collecting and cleaning our own water. These are the major moves that I plan to make in the next few years that I think are bigger and bolder than any financial move you could ever possibly make.
Mm.
Because then whatever happens, we're good. I'm taking the bow and arrow, take the fishing pole. I'm gonna go in the backyard, get some veggies to slice up with it, and we're gonna be all right. It rains plenty in Florida. I will be fine collecting with the rainwater barrel.
Right.
I started thinking beyond that. I went off on that rant, but that through God, when I found God, because he made himself present in my life, I talk about a lot of times the beginning of the process where I prayed, although I was an atheist.
Mm.
And I prayed because, once again, it's why I started being kinder, more loving, more compassionate. I wasn't those things. I faked it in the beginning because I thought it would change my life. And it did. And now those acts of kindness are genuine.
Mm.
So if you see me on the street and I'm kind to you, it is from my heart. And praying, I just didn't know what else to do. I was sitting in the cell. My life was that bad. And immediately it helped me because I felt relief. I felt relief of just saying these things out loud or even into my mind. But as he, and I say he, not knowing,
Sure.
that made himself present in my life, I started feeling a bigger sense of responsibility. Like, wow, man, God has made himself present in my life. I have a responsibility to him and to my ancestors who have gotten me here to this place of life than to just sit on the couch and play video games and live an easy, cushy life. And no, I have a responsibility to work and grow and learn and figure things out and become the best possible version of myself that I could possibly be. And therefore, I could be of better service to everyone around me. So it's sort of that paradoxical thinking where you're being selfish for the greater good. Sort of like I was just talking about, where I need to make some material gains to increase my spiritual growth or to my impact on a spiritual level. And it's like that sometimes. So that is what I'm grinding towards. That's what I'm going for. I feel that responsibility and I hold myself to it. I do see a sort of disconnect between the financial and the spiritual realm. Although I can't complain, I'm absolutely comfortable. And maybe I'm just not being patient because, our time and God's time is different. He gives you what you're prepared for. He gives you what you're ready for, and he gives you what you worked for.
Right.
That's why they say God only helps those that help themselves, because if you're praying on the couch, but you're never getting up, your life ain't going to change much.
No.
And then I also feel like the success on the spiritual side, as it relates to the financial side, wherever you're at on a financial side, it's almost indicative to your level of commitment. Now, of course, there are anomalies. There are people that are rich and great and they're awful people. And there are people that are poor and are great and are, don't have any money and they're great people, So there's always the anomalies. But in me and my life, I know where I could do better. I know where I'm falling off. We talked about it last week, a couple weeks ago when we did the episode, smoke a joint here and there, go out and have an alcoholic beverage once or twice a month, skip workout every now and then, not much, but still there are ways that I could do better. There are things that I can improve. And I do feel like, especially with my diet, I fall off a lot with the diet and it throws me off my energy, my thoughts, everything. If I could tighten this self-mastery, because that's where it all ties in too, is like the more you can master yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, your behaviors, man, then you're absolutely a force in this world because you're moving in exactly the direction that you want to move. And there's nothing else and no other factors are playing in with it other than huge external events. And I'm not able to do that yet. I still lose my cool and get angry. I still, just like you were saying, am in a different position than other people and get very judgmental. Just the other day at my kid's soccer practice, the coach hands out the snacks. It's Cheez-Its, Oreos, juice with sugar and high fructose corn syrup. I grab that. I'm doing a great job. My son handed it to me. Bioengineered ingredients, genetically modified ingredients, trash. And I get very judgy on her. Like, they're at a physical activity. Why are you giving them Oreo? But there are the things we need to work on. There are the things I need to work on. My anger, my judgment, my diet sometimes. And I truly feel like this. If I could really dial in on the details, man, then that spiritual success would match that financial success because the effort is equal. But that's just my theory, and that's how I play it. But I do sometimes have that thought, just like with the validation, and oh man, I wish somebody would let me know that I'm good, right?
Yeah.
That I would say, man, I wish God would let me know that I'm good and give me what I desire. But hey, man, like I said, we're humans, and there's a greater plan. And after I have that thought, I go, no, just let's go, keep it in. It's all on God's time, and you're here to service. You're here to serve Him. You're here to serve your family, and that's what I'm continually doing.
I hope you don't mind this. I don't think you do, but I like when you say certain things. It reminds me of things I've learned in the scriptures. So I guess that'd be a compliment to you. But like for one, you said, when you said that God had touched your life and then you felt a responsibility, but the Bible says that he who was given much, much will be required. So God doesn't give gifts, from what I understand, that he doesn't expect you to use. He doesn't give them just because, hey, I'm giving you a gift. Although he could do that, because I've gotten plenty of gifts I don't deserve, right? That's called grace. Undeserved merit. He's done things for me that I didn't earn, right? But I will say this. God gives you gifts and talents to use. So I agree. I think that you saw that, and I think that's part of experience with God. When he touches your life, you realize, oh, I got to do something with this. Like, this isn't just for me to soak up and be selfish with, right? Then you also said, oh man, I lost the track. You were talking about, oh man, the second example of what you said was a good one too. Well, let me ask you this then, because you were saying about, we can get focused on, the more we pursue God or the highest ideal, we start to see where we're falling short. And the more we tighten that up, the more success in general we have, right, towards that goal. But I found, and I don't know how, you can't really, this is something outside of your control. It's something that happens that's a blessing, but it becomes in a time of crisis. And I wondered if you ever had this. The times where God has come the most through for me is when I've become to my limits. When I've come to a point where I realize it's beyond my ability. Like, I've tried my hardest in every aspect. I've in my mind, I've tried to do whatever I can, and I've come to this limit, and I'm to a point where I'm like, oh man, I just can't do anymore. I don't know what else to do. And then God comes in. And it's like you become so grateful and you experience such a thankfulness because I've strived to my limit, but I've seen my limit. I've seen my human limitation, and then I've seen the hand of God push me past that. And it's awesome. Have you ever experienced that? And I mean, that's something that's beautiful, but you really can only get to that when you've strived so hard and gone to your limits. And then God comes in and pushes you past that. I mean, that's a really great experience, but you can't get there just by, like you said, sitting on the couch and not trying. You got to try first. And then once you exhaust yourself, it's awesome that I see that God takes you a step further, a part where we can't go. And it opens your eyes to the miraculous. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that a lot of people feel that way when they experience challenges, and I think it carries them through. Like, God is only going to put so much on my plate that I can handle.
Yeah.
And God gives his strongest battles to his greatest warriors.
Yeah.
And that's something that we must hold faith in. And I guess as far as a particular experience of reaching my limit and experiencing some sort of miraculous event, I can't name a specific, but if you look at my life, the whole sort of, in a general sense, is miraculous.
Yeah.
Because I, traveled through the belly of the beast. I traveled through the bowels of hell, and I was snatched out of it and gave a greater purpose.
Yeah.
I never would have experienced that. And it is such a powerful platform, man. And I use it. Like, yeah, that was me, man. That was me. And I was this, that, and the third. And I have no reason, I have no problem calling myself all these nasty things because I'm not him today, man. And yeah, God gave me that grace. God gave me that second chance, this whole nother life that I get to live and see what it's lived, to live righteously, to live honorably, to live lovingly, because I lived miserably and criminally and addictedly and all that stuff. I'm making up words now. So you get that. And I think that's something that people need to hold on to, especially now. But you can't do it idly.
Right.
Idleness is the devil. I firmly believe that. And people that say they're bored, well, you're boring. Figure it out. We have this wondrous world, this precious gift of life that we have been giving. And if you're breathing today, then you've been given it again. So make use of it. Don't smack the hand of God away from you by not being grateful for your life. And don't encourage and open up that crack. Don't make that chink in your armor of idleness and boredom, that crack, that chink, for the devil to seep that negative leech-like energy in, because that is where it can enter your heart. The evil can enter your heart. I was talking about this. You might like this, and then we'll move on. While we were sick, we were talking about before I hit record, everybody was a little under the weather, was catching up on some TV, guilty as charged. I watched a lot of TV, and I felt, I talked about it last episode, Lions Not Lambs. And then I said it out loud, and I was a little embarrassed that I was talking about all this TV. I go, oh man, I really did watch that much TV, y'all, but I've been under the weather, and I promise I'm getting back to work. Because other than that, I'm about an hour of consumption a day, maybe, whether video game or TV, about an hour at night.
Right.
That's healthy for me. But I was catching up on the Lord of the Rings, the Prime series, and I have to say it's masterful, man. Once again, I think it's based on the characters of the Silmarillion.
Yes.
I didn't read that whole book. I read pieces of it, so it's definitely different. But I think they really did a wonderful job, and I was extremely entertained, which is rare for TV, where I'm sucked into it and like, wow, like really, literally on the edge of my seat. So kudos to those folks, man, for creating an amazing show. So the main character is like an elf warrior, commander of the armies. They just got out of this crazy battle scene. There's no one barely alive, and the people that are alive are scattered. So she ends up with this younger, I would say teenage boy who's another minor but major character moving forward. And they're talking, and he says to her, how many orcs have you killed? And she's like, a lot, more than you can count, more than you would even know. I've been alive, thousands of years. And the kid starts going, good, great, yeah, get them and all this stuff. And she goes, watch speaking like that. The minute that you start to enjoy the killing, it gives you that crack in your armor. I'm paraphrasing, for the evil to seep in. That's where it could get its claws in you. It gets its roots in you. And I said that, they were discussing obviously a battle, a wartime scenario, but we all go through this. We all go through this. Whenever we go through tired times, down times where we see things in the world that we just don't agree with, we just don't like, and we get judgmental, when we get angry, when we get frustrated, when we get mean, we get nasty. That is that crack, that seat in armor that could get us nasty and get us mean and get us back to where the evil wants us, stuck in that negative mode. And we all go through it. It's a constant battle, man. It's like they say, you can either get bitter or you can get better, because you're going to experience all these things. So use it as a lesson, use it as a reference point, and move forward with what you know to be true. And whenever the mind tries to sway, because no matter how much you're meditating, how much you're praying, how much you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, the mind is a funny thing, and we've talked about that a lot when me and you link together on podcast. The mind will take you places if you let it, man. So be stoic and just or be of a thought process of I'm exercising my mind and allow it. It could do whatever it wants. Nasty, vile, judgmental. Bring it back. Just constantly bring it back. And the more and more you bring it back, the more and more you'll feel that way genuinely.
Yeah. I find it's interesting. You were talking about like when the food you were experiencing when you went to the game. That's interesting because working at this, I went back to a pizza place. That was I've worked at a pizza place as a manager for like 10, 14 years. I always worked at restaurants. But, going there, I'm surrounded by bad food. Like, back in the day when I worked there, that's why I ended up with diabetes and so overweight. I was drinking, 2 or 3 2-liters of Mountain Dew a night, just chugging it down, eating slices of pizza, all that garbage. And, now I'm back in there. And before I was really controlled with my diet. I didn't have any of that crap even around me. Now I'm back at work. Oh, we got some pizza left over. Want a slice? So weeks go by. No. And then, I can have this. I'll have a slice, and then that starts to spiral. What's interesting about is I believe there's also, now I'm not saying that the people are aware of this, but I'm saying that there's an element, it's called, I guess Christians would call it spiritual warfare. But it's not just, I don't want a slice. Well, why don't you want a slice? Because it's not good for me. It's not what I want. Oh, it's not good for you, huh? And then it becomes almost like, let's get Tony to eat a slice. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's playful, but there's also, or the negativity that I'm starting to, experience. There's a lot of people that really hate their job. They don't like where they're at in life. And I want to be a positive impact on people's lives. And I want to be that light that's there, right? But man, day after day, the negative, the mean, the rudeness over and over and over again, before you know it, I'm being affected by it. So I come home and I'm complaining about work and I'm talking about all the negativity and I'm letting it soak in. And I think there's an element, I think we have to be aware of that. There is a opposing force trying to maybe, in some ways, the opposing force is what strengthens us. It's like going to the gym. You got to have resistance when you lift weights. So you can look at it like that. Like, okay, they're being negative. It's my chance to strengthen my resolve to be positive, to be a good influence. But you have to be aware that there is that out there. It's attacking you. It's trying to create the chinks in your armor, like you said. To start to eating bad, and then I start to feel bad, and then it affects my health and it affects my mood. Or if I start to feed into the negative vibes around me, then I can start to become just like that. And it's actually a challenge. You can start to feel afflicted. Oh, woe is me, Or I could be like, well, it's my opportunity to resist and to grow. Like you said, it's kind of like where I'm putting the work in. But it's good to listen to a friend like you to be aware of that. Like, okay, this is my opportunity to grow. This isn't just me being afflicted, being all self-piteous. I can actually say, well, if I want to be a positive, good person, you have to interact with other people to be like that. It's easy to be a good, positive person if you're by yourself in a basement. It's harder when you're interacting with people, right? But that's your opportunity,
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think that being aware of it is the ultimate win, because at least you're able to combat it on some level.
Yeah.
And I think it's why it's very important for us to tailor our lives in this manner. And I talked about this on one of the reels I did, is like setting the battlefield with many things, with people whom I come in contact with. Now you're at work, that's different, but in general.
Yeah.
Tailoring who I'm with, tailoring what I'm eating, tailoring what I'm watching and listening to build the person I want to be and be around the people that I want to be, because that stuff does influence you. And when you're stuck at work all day with negative, nasty people, I could see very quickly how you would come home and just be venting to the wife. Venting is, I actually think, is healthy. I do this quite a bit. I just think it's a fine line between venting and complaining. So once again, mind the awareness. And, me and my wife are just as guilty as just what you were experiencing. I'm talking to the wife, complaining about work, and now all of a sudden I'm being there. We could be driving in the car. We talked about this before. Traffic. Someone does something nasty, and now you're going on this long story about how this terrible person, they must be going here and doing that and doing drugs and blah, 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 and all these things. You're going on all these, this negative, nasty rabbit hole, and none of that could even be true. It could have been an accident. They could have been in a rush. Their kid could have been sick. You never even know. And then later on the same day, or maybe a couple of days later, when you're in a different mode of thinking, you could make the same mistake and think, oh man, this guy behind me is probably saying the same thing I was saying about these people, and none of it is even true. So be aware. Constantly bring yourself back. Like you said, this is the opportunity to gain the resistance, to be the light, to infect goodness into the world instead of always absorbing the bad. And it is difficult, man. I haven't been to the prison in a while, and I'm just going to be totally honest about that. But it's because we moved like an hour and a half away from it, so I haven't been able to get down as much. But when I used to go every week, I would feel it. When I left, I would feel sapped, dry. I would feel like I would have bad thoughts. I would feel depleted from being in that negative, nasty place. And although I would have some very pleasant conversations with some of the inmates and every now and then with some of the correctional officers,
sure,
overall, it was a nasty, dark place filled with really bad people. There was times where I went to Ad Seg, which is lockup, and went around and prayed with the guys. And I mean, if they were even willing to, and you see some nasty stuff, you smell some nasty stuff, you hear some really nasty, vile things, but that is the path of the light bringer. So are you a light bringer? Are you going to bring light into dark places, or are you going to absorb all the darkness and negativity from the world? It is based upon your personality, but it can be worked on. It can be cultivated. And I will say that, it's a constant battle for me, and I can't really tell another person how to go about it. Because like I said, when I would leave that prison, man, I would literally feel it dampening on my soul for like 24 hours, but I always would tell myself, like, it doesn't matter. This is your lot. This is the chosen, the warriors of the light, the spiritual warriors. And this is your job, to bring this light into this dark place. And, maybe on a way lesser note, you could sort of grapple with that same mentality going just out into the world, man, going into work, going out into the world, because you're going to see a lot of that same negativity out there in the world. And then I guess it even moves to another genre when you get to places like what I got frustrated about the other day, where you see people doing things that you perceive to be as completely ignorant. I mean, you're feeding kids some of the nastiest chemicals in the planet, and genetically modified ingredients, probably some known carcinogens in there, and you're readily giving it to your children. So it was hard for me not to get judgmental. But you have to look as like it's ignorant, like not like I'm saying they were ignorant, but like that aspect, you're displaying ignorance. And unless I'm willing to enlighten you on it, which I'm not, because they're going to look at me like I'm crazy, that's what this platform is for me to enlighten folks on things that I've come to realizations on, which food is one of them. Unless you want to wage that battle, then just leave it alone. You don't have to go down the rabbit hole, that's stupid and all these things, because once again, like we're saying, that's feeding into the negativity. That's becoming what we don't like in this world. And that's really the enemy's greatest weapon against us, is like, if we could just get him to sink down to our level, in any battle, there is the person taking the moral high road, and there is the person that is every trick in the book is okay. And when you seep down to that level, then it's just the whole thing goes to shit. Yeah. So we really have to focus on maintaining that moral high ground, being that light, and bringing it to dark places. And when people are like that, like in my circumstance, it's either based upon ignorance, which you can't be blamed for everything that you don't know. And then a lot of the nastiness and negativity is due to just like what you said about the folks at your job. They're not happy with their life. You're working there by choice to go make some extra money.
Right.
A lot of them are probably working there because they have to, because it's the only place that they can get a job, where they're ex-cons or they have a bad record or they have firings under their belt or whatever the case may be. And until they figure out that, hey, this is it, this is my life, no one's going to change it but me. No one's going to make it better but me. So let me make this job, this day, right here, the very best that I could possibly make it, and then pile that on top of each other.
Yep.
Guess what? They'll be asking them to be the manager instead of you, and you can stay home with your wife.
Yeah.
And then your life's better,
Yeah.
Stop focusing on the nasty stuff, man, and realize you are your own savior. You could put in the work and you could become better. You could change your whole life if you, for once, get out of your head, stop blaming everybody, calling everybody names, being mean and nasty. Maybe the problem is you. Just accept that as a possibility, and it will take you far.
What's interesting is you talked about, there's a time and place to share wisdom. The Bible says, as a paraphrase, if you instruct a wise man, he'll become wiser still. But if sometimes you try to instruct a fool, they'll turn against you and attack you, and you have to really think about where you're at and who wants to hear it. Like, do the people at the sports event really want you to tell them that they shouldn't be? No, necessarily not. But the thing is they're the people me and you would want to talk to the most, because they don't know, right? Ignorance without knowledge. So now me and you are here talking on this show, and all your listeners are people who obviously are seeking wisdom, want to have a better life, want to be encouraged, and you're kind of helping them to grow. But it's like, so it can be frustrating, because the people you want to talk to the most are the people that aren't listening to it because they don't want to hear it. I think I personally believe it's God has to bring a person along to a certain point when they're ready to actually receive wisdom. And that can be a very hard lesson to learn. I know when I first became a Christian, and I was really serious about God, and my whole life changed. I didn't want the sex, the drugs, and everything. I wanted to change my life. I wanted to do something purposeful in my life. And I was just telling everybody, but what that can become is you start to get pushback. You're telling people that aren't ready to hear it, don't want to hear it. And I was too naive and inexperienced to see it right away. And I would end up literally, out of good intentions, end up arguing and fighting with people. And I had to realize, oh man, I gotta stop that nonsense. But I was telling my boss, because I was doing something, because they have different ovens there. They have the brick ovens, and I'm used to the conveyor oven. And I was learning some stuff he was showing me, and he kind of felt like he might be like, he was hesitant to tell me because he thought I may get offended. I said, hey man, I appreciate that you're taking the time, that you feel I'm worth enough for invest some of your knowledge in. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will be offended because they want you to think, oh, I know everything, or I'm not stupid, or you got to tell me. I was like, you actually think I'm worth the time to speak to me about something? That's pretty valuable to be to that point. I said, and that's what I told him. I said, if you instruct a wise man, I want to be wiser still. I'm not going to be offended. I want to throw all the knowledge you can at me, brother. I want to soak it up, and I thought that's interesting, but it's a real hard lesson to learn, to when to open your mouth and when not to. It's like you got to be patient and wait for that magical moment, like where somebody is literally wanting to hear from some wisdom from you, right? That's pretty cool, man. Honestly, it's awesome.
It is cool. It is cool when it happens, and I'm gonna start wrapping this up. It happens so much more rarely than you want. Yes. As a person like me, and I don't know if you're like this as well. Like, I'm a talker. I didn't know so many things in my life that now I know, and I was upset when I found out these things that nobody told me, and I want to share. That's why I do the podcast. I want to share this with. I want to share the knowledge. I'll take the constructive criticism and the feedback from it so that I can learn and grow even further. Yeah. But you got to know when to pick your battles. I mean, we are human beings, and we have a limited amount of energy, and a lot of energy is expended via talking. Yeah. And so one thing that I learned as I grow older was to mind my words. My words, not only because not everything's for everybody, not everything's everybody's business, but then also from what you're talking about here. And what I'm just talking about is the way that we need to grow as men, as women, as leaders, is to become emotionally intelligent to
Mm,
where we could gauge the room, we could gauge other people. We know when to pick our battles. We know, because you'll know when to stand up and go, no, enough's enough. I'm done, and we're not doing that. I just did it with this guy with this property the other day, and I felt bad about it, and I talked about it, about how I yelled at the guy, and I didn't call him any names or curse, but I yelled at him because I said, enough's enough. We're not doing this. You're not going to treat me like that. You're not going to behave like that, and that's unacceptable in my life. And we're allowed to do that. We're allowed to have that righteous fury in our lives. We're human beings, and we need to be respected our boundaries, and be able to move forward in our truth the way that we see fit, as long as it's not harming anybody.
sure.
But there's the flip side of that coin where, like you say, you're out there, you wish you could enlighten some people on a topic, but you're not able to do it. And it just comes with that emotional intelligence, and growing and maturing as a human being to be able to see what's what, and react the way that you should in a stoic manner. But when you get that crack, when you get that opening, when someone gives you that, that magical opportunity in the midst of conversation, then take it, man. I think that we as people need to conversate more and discuss more, and we needed to develop the ability to disagree without yelling, screaming. I mean, the yelling and screaming that I was doing on the phone was something that was absolutely ridiculous, and I'll yell and scream all over again if it happened again. But in a debate, in a conversation, in a friendly atmosphere like a soccer field, we need to hold these difficult conversations, and we need to be able to do it without yelling and screaming and frustration. And it can be very difficult. And that's why I always say, during this time of preparation, during these dark times that you see these light warriors like us that will come to the forefront, we need to sharpen our swords. And that's what we're doing right now. And that's what we're going to continue to be doing on Creating Greatness, sharpening our swords, the most powerful weapon that we have. It doesn't matter how big, how strong, how tough, how smart, any of that. If you cannot articulate yourself effectively and communicate efficiently with the broader spectrum of people, especially people that are like on the other side of the spectrum, because we're not going to make real progress when we are calling people names and dismissing people as crazy until we start really connecting, conversating, having the difficult conversations without anger and aggression and name calling and all the things that you sort of see it degrading to, like in the modern media, because that's like teenage shit, man. And we're grown and we're adults. So, hey, let's all move forward in our truth, do it together, do it peacefully, and talk to one another to try to coexist more harmoniously. Tony, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Yeah, thank you. And, to leave you with the last, I just want to say, the fact that, we're on the same journey means a lot. Knowing that, like, that you're out there struggling, trying to be a better man, trying to be more of who you want to be, who God wants you to be, running this race, even knowing that I could message you saying, dude, I'm struggling, man. I need some help. That means a lot. And I bet you the people that listen to you, and myself included, it's good to have somebody to encourage you, to know you're not alone doing it, even to pop you out of your own self-pity, or to think that you're all in this big bubble, that there's other people out there doing it. So I want to thank you so much for being that person, being that influence, and being out there, being a good friend. I just want to say thanks, man.
Absolutely, Tone.
Right, brother.
You're one of my very best friends, man. I appreciate you. We're building this community here, Spiritual Warriors, man. We're building this camaraderie. We're coming together in brotherhood with leadership, people with real values and ethics, man. And we're going to keep doing